You ever asked an atheist how many days in the week there are? Well, I have, and they've said to me 7. But why 7? Actually, that comes from the Bible.
All right, let's see it.
Because God made everything in 6 days and rested for 1.
So this is actually quite a complex and an interesting story. But to be brief, it is not likely that the priestly account of creation in Genesis 1 is the very origin of the 7-day week. But it was influential in formalizing and in establishing the 7-day week as one of the fundamental divisions of the lunar and the lunisolar calendar. But the use of 7-day stretches for the celebration of festivals, for temple inaugurations, and things like that goes back to around 2100 BCE. Gudea of Lagash is the first time we see people referring to celebrations of festivals on the 1st, on the 8th, on the 15th, on the 22nd, on the 29th day after the new moon or something like that. And in other Northwest Semitic literature, we have this pattern of using 7 days as a symbol for completeness to refer to the accomplishment of certain acts or tasks. So in the Ugaritic literature, for instance, you have people doing stuff and it groups them into pairs. On the 1st and the 2nd, on the 3rd and the 4th, on the 5th and the 6th, and then it would say on the 7th day they finally completed, or they finally accomplished, or they finally did what they were supposed to do. And we see this borrowed in some biblical literature with Jericho, for instance. They march around once each day for 6 days, and then on the 7th day they march around 7 times, and then the walls come down as they blast the trumpets. So that's reflecting that broader Northwest Semitic literary convention. And then in Babylon, you had those celebrations in 7-day periods, but you also had temple inaugurations that took 7 days to complete. And this probably sits at the root of what's going on in the priestly creation account, because we're in the exile, or we're just coming out of the exile. There's no temple, and so we don't have sacred space set apart to worship in. But the inauguration of the temple takes 7 days. The creation account in Genesis 1 frames the creation of the heavens and the earth very similar to the inauguration of a temple. And so we may not have sacred space, but we can carve out sacred time and use that 7th day as a holy day, a delineation of sacred time for our worship. And so in the absence of a temple and sacred space, let's create a sacred period of time to use for worship. Now, the Sabbath most likely predates the Babylonian exile, but it was probably irregular in its celebration rather than something that happened every 7 days. But we see it probably assigned in the priestly literature somewhere around the year 500 BCE, and that becomes influential in establishing the 7-day week in later societies, and particularly the Greco-Roman world.
So if you believe in the 7-day week, you're really attesting to the truth of creation as recorded in God's Word in Genesis.
So even if there were a decent case to make that the 7-day week originates fundamentally in the account of creation in Genesis 1, believing in it wouldn't attest to the truth of anything so much as it would just attest to your willingness to accept a pretty universal convention in modern societies.